I was scrolling through my phone when I saw it. Rachel's latest post. She had a glass of wine in her hand, smiling like she'd just won the lottery. The caption read, "Freedom feels good," in big, bold letters. I stared at the picture for a second, trying to make sense of it. There she was, the woman I'd been married to for 20 years, beaming like she was finally free from some invisible weight. I didn't need to ask who the weight had been. It had been me, of course. Yeah, I knew she'd been unhappy. Hell, we'd both known it for years. But seeing it like that, out there for everyone to see, hurt. It felt like being naked in front of a crowd. Exposed. This was her victory. She was finally taking the control she'd felt she was denied for so long. I let out a breath, fingers still glued to the screen. I had been blindsided by this. I thought I had time, that we could work through it, but she'd already made her decision. And here it was, in black and white, for everyone to see. It wasn't just a personal betrayal anymore, it was public. I tried to swallow the knot in my throat. Instead, I clicked off her profile and put my phone down. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of reacting to her little show. But something stirred inside me. She thought she'd left me behind, that she'd taken the upper hand. But I'd been preparing for this. Years ago, I'd made sure everything I'd worked for would be mine, no matter what. Rachel hadn't noticed the paperwork I'd quietly been putting together over time. The trusts, the accounts, all the stuff she thought was still ours. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like I had control. I wasn't going to let her steamroll me. I hadn't been blindsided. I'd seen this coming, and I'd been one step ahead. She didn't know it yet, but that post would be the last thing she'd celebrate for a while. I moved silently, calmly, pulling up the legal documents I'd arranged. It was time to make sure that she wouldn't be taking anything from me. And that was the moment I knew I'd been outsmarted, sure, but she didn't have a clue about what was coming next. I needed to talk to someone who knew how to handle things like this, someone who could give me some perspective. So I called Tom. We'd been friends for years, but his work, asset protection law, was what I needed right now. He wasn't the kind of guy who'd be shocked by the situation. He dealt with people trying to outsmart each other for a living. I met him at a small coffee shop down the street from his office. Tom was already there, sitting in the corner booth, sipping a black coffee. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, like he was always ready to jump into a fight. "Hey man, thanks for meeting," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. "No problem," Tom said, setting his cup down. He didn't ask any questions at first, just let me talk. I didn't waste time. Rachel's gone full throttle on the divorce. I wasn't expecting her to rub it in like that, but I'm not an idiot. I know what she's after. She thinks she's got me right where she wants me. Tom leaned back, looking at me like he was sizing up the whole situation. "And what do you want to do about it?" "I want to make sure she gets nothing she doesn't deserve," I said, feeling a chill in my gut. She's already posted that freedom crap online like she won. I need to take control of what's mine before she tries to grab it all. Tom nodded. "You've been ahead of the game for a while now, haven't you?" I wasn't sure if it was a compliment or a dig. Either way, he was right. I'd been preparing for this for years. Slowly, carefully, I'd moved my wealth, made sure Rachel wouldn't have access to any of it. The assets, the property, everything. She'd never have a clue where it all was. But now I needed to be sure. She's going to come for everything. I'm just worried about what she knows and what she doesn't. "You've been strategic," Tom said, leaning in now. "It's not about what she knows. It's about what she can prove. And if you've been smart, really smart, there's not much she can grab. I need to know how to lock it all down. For good." Tom rubbed his chin, thinking for a moment. "You've already made a solid start. The trusts, the transfers. But now it's about being patient. You've got leverage, Matt, and you can use it. Don't give her any ammunition. You keep quiet, keep doing what you're doing. Let her think she's in charge while you keep securing your future." I leaned back, digesting his words. "So, you think I should just let her believe she's winning, while I keep moving stuff around?" "Exactly," he said without hesitation. "But not recklessly. Make sure everything's in place. Double-check those trusts. The key here is timing. The longer she thinks she's ahead, the more mistakes she'll make. That hit me hard. He was right. Rachel's confidence was her biggest vulnerability. She had no idea what I was doing behind the scenes. I'd always been methodical, taking my time, moving things around in ways she'd never understand. And now it was time to let that play out. I'll keep going over the details, make sure nothing gets missed. I was already thinking about the next steps, what properties, what assets. The cabin was my next target. Rachel still thought it was ours. She had no idea that the deed had already been transferred into a private trust. You're in control, Matt, but you've got to be smart. She's got a lawyer who will catch on eventually. Be ready for that. I nodded. I will. I just need to make sure everything's set up before the next move. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what I was about to do hanging over me. There was no going back now. Rachel had made her move, but I was going to make sure she'd never get what she thought she was entitled to. As I walked out of the coffee shop, I felt a quiet sense of resolve settle over me. Tom was right, I didn't need to rush. I wasn't going to make this personal. I wasn't going to let it spiral into an ugly battle right away. But I'd already taken the first step, and I'd be damned if I let her think she had me cornered. This was just the beginning. I didn't plan on being there, but I needed to know where Rachel's head was at. I'd heard through the grapevine that she was throwing some big freedom dinner with Emily and Samantha. It wasn't hard to find an excuse to show up at the same restaurant, slip into a corner booth, and keep an eye on things from a distance. It was easy enough to see they were celebrating her new life. The three of them were laughing loudly, Rachel's voice rising above the others with that tone I'd come to recognize, the one that meant she thought she had won. "I can't believe how much lighter I feel," Rachel said, her words floating over the ambient noise. "Like I've been holding my breath for years. Matt never appreciated me, you know? He was always so distracted. All those years he was too busy with his work, too busy with everything else." I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to stand up and go over there. The nerve, the absolute nerve of her to talk like that when I'd been putting in the hours trying to make a life for us, for the kids. But I kept my seat, letting her words settle like a stone in my gut. She wasn't done. I swear, if I had known how much I'd be holding myself back, I would have done this years ago. Now I can finally breathe. I noticed Emily and Samantha nodding along, grinning like they were feeding off Rachel's high. Rachel's whole posture was different, bigger, more confident. She looked like she was enjoying herself more than I'd seen in a long time, like the woman who'd been pushing for this divorce had shed all the weight of being married to me. "We're going to move in together soon," Rachel continued, and I could hear the smugness in her voice now. "Ben's looking for a new place. It's going to be perfect." She paused and laughed, the sound sharp, almost mocking. "Matt's going to be miserable without me. It's just so funny how he thought he could hold me down for all these years. I can't wait for him to see me living my best life." Ben, her new boyfriend, the personal trainer, the guy who had slid right in the moment things started to crumble. They'd probably met at the gym or some other place where she could pretend she wasn't breaking apart. I wasn't an idiot. I knew what was going on. But hearing her talk about him so openly, without a shred of shame, made me want to throw something. But I didn't react. Not yet. Samantha raised her glass, her voice loud enough that it was impossible not to overhear. "He'll be the one eating his heart out, watching you move on with your life. You deserve this, Rachel. After everything, you deserve a big payout." I almost scoffed, but it was the way she said it. Like Rachel was entitled to something, like the world owed her a reward for putting up with me. My stomach twisted again. Rachel smiled and took a sip from her wine glass. "Oh, I'll get my payout, don't worry. There's no way Matt's going to walk away with everything. He's always been so smug about his assets. I'll make sure the court sees through all of it." Her words rang out with so much confidence, it was almost laughable. She had no idea. She still thought I was going to be the one scrambling. She didn't know I'd already planned for every single move she'd try to pull. She didn't know that everything she thought she was entitled to, every dollar, every property, was already beyond her reach. I watched them for a while longer, all three of them talking like my life was a joke. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I kept it down. I wasn't going to let her see how much it hurt. Instead, I sat there, staring at the half-empty glass of wine Rachel was holding, and thought about the next step. The next move wasn't about reacting. It was about waiting, letting her get comfortable, letting her think she had control, while I worked quietly in the background. She could laugh, she could gloat, she could plan her new life with Ben. But the truth was, I had already taken my power back. Every move I made was deliberate. Every asset I had, every trust I'd set up, was locked down and beyond her reach. She didn't know it yet, but she was walking into a trap she couldn't see. As I stood up to leave, I felt the calm creeping in. Rachel's confidence was about to crash. I just had to wait for her to realize how little she knew. And when she did, it wouldn't be pretty. But by then, I'd be so far ahead of her, it wouldn't matter. I walked out of the restaurant, keeping my face neutral, but inside, I was more certain than ever. This was just the beginning, and she had no idea what was coming next. I drove up to the cabin a few days after that dinner. I hadn't been there in a while. Too many reminders of Rachel and the family we used to be. But the place was mine, at least in my mind. Rachel still thought it was a joint asset, but I knew better. She didn't have a clue that the deed had already been transferred into a private trust. She wouldn't find out until it was too late. I called Tom from the driveway before I even stepped out of the car. "It's done," I said when he picked up, trying to keep my voice steady. But something about being out there, in the quiet of the mountains, had me feeling more grounded than I'd felt in months. "I need you to make sure everything else is locked down. Double-check the backup plan for the cabin. And the other properties. I don't want any surprises." Tom's voice came through clear, his tone calm as always. "I'll go over everything again. No mistakes. You've covered your bases, Matt. But I'll make sure Rachel can't make any claims. I'll get the backup strategies set up. You don't have to worry about a thing." I let out a long breath, leaning back against the car. The weight of it all, the house, the assets, the future, was still there, but in that moment I felt more in control than ever. "Thanks, Tom. Just keep me updated. I'm going to spend a few days up here, try to get my head straight." "Take your time," he said before hanging up. I stood there for a moment, letting the quiet settle over me. The cabin sat in a small clearing, surrounded by trees and the remnants of fall, dry leaves, bare branches. It felt like the world was a little smaller here, the noise of everything else gone. Just for a bit. But even in the silence, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was all coming to a head. It was only a matter of time before Rachel started pushing harder, before she realized she wasn't getting what she expected. But she hadn't figured out that I had already made sure of that. I went inside the cabin, letting the door close softly behind me. The place smelled like wood, dust, and the faint trace of a life that had once been here, ours, Rachel's and mine. It had been so long since I'd been alone here, but it was almost comforting now. I walked through the rooms, inspecting everything, as if seeing it with fresh eyes. Every corner, every space felt like a piece of my life I had to protect. Rachel had never really cared about the cabin the way I did. She never felt the pull of this place the way I had. But it wasn't hers anymore. It never would be again. I sat down at the old desk, pulling out my phone. It was time to review everything. All the trusts I'd set up, the assets I'd moved, none of it was in Rachel's name anymore. She couldn't touch it, not legally. I ran through the details with Tom in my mind, ticking off boxes. Everything had been done with precision, but it wasn't enough to just set things in motion. I had to be sure. I thought back to the years I'd spent suppressing my needs, my desires. Rachel had lived in luxury, wrapped up in the things she wanted, while I worked to make her happy, to make sure she had everything she thought she deserved. It was always about her. But I'd been patient, and now it was my turn. She didn't know how much I had protected myself over the years, how much I'd been planning for this exact moment. I'd let her think she was winning, let her think that her gloating was all she had left. But it was only part of the picture. I had set things up so that I'd walk away with what I'd earned, with what was rightfully mine. I got up from the desk and looked out the window at the stretch of land beyond the cabin. It was peaceful, but the calm was deceptive. This wasn't just about a cabin. This was about making sure Rachel never got what she thought she was entitled to. About making sure she could never lay claim to something that wasn't hers. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about punishing her. It was about protecting what I had worked for. The life I had built, piece by piece, while she enjoyed the benefits of everything I'd made. She thought she was the one making the moves now, but I was already 3 steps ahead. I went out to the porch, pulling my jacket tighter around me. The air was colder than I expected, biting at my skin, but it didn't bother me. I needed to be sharp, clear-headed. The next phase was coming. The cabin was safe, but there were more moves to make. More steps to take to ensure I had the upper hand when it all came crashing down. Rachel thought she was walking into a win. She had no idea that the whole game had already been rigged. The courthouse was cold, the kind of sterile cold that made everything feel too official. I stood in the hallway, waiting for the doors to open, listening to the clack of heels and low murmurs. Rachel hadn't arrived yet, but I knew she'd be walking in with that same superior look on her face, expecting the world to hand her exactly what she thought she deserved. She probably still thought this would be a slam dunk for her. I didn't walk in like she did, head held high like she was walking into a victory parade. No, I just slipped in quietly, head low, trying not to draw attention. I didn't need to show off. I knew I had the upper hand, and that was enough. When Rachel finally walked in, she was all smiles, chatting with her lawyer, Steve, like they were in a coffee shop, not a courtroom. She was wearing her usual, "I'm better than this" attitude, and I couldn't help but watch her from across the room. Steve, her lawyer, shot me a brief glance before leaning in to whisper something in her ear. Rachel nodded, the smugness not even trying to hide itself on her face. She had no idea. The courtroom was packed with lawyers, but only a few spectators, mostly family and a couple of other divorce cases going on at the same time. We took our places, Rachel to one side, me to the other. I stayed silent, but I couldn't help the little smirk that crept up when I saw her nervously adjust her posture. She still didn't know how much of my wealth had already been locked down. The judge came in and we all rose. He was a no-nonsense guy, middle-aged, gray hair, with a stern face that made you feel like you were in trouble just by looking at him. He waved us all back into our seats and we got down to business. Steve started by laying out the assets they believed were at stake. The house, the accounts, the properties. He read through the list, making it sound like Rachel was entitled to everything. It was the same script he'd been using for weeks, trying to paint me as the villain, the one who'd hoarded money, kept her in the dark, all that typical nonsense. Then it was Tom's turn. My lawyer didn't need to make a big show of things. He was calm, measured, letting the evidence do the talking. He pulled out documents, presented lists of assets, and one by one, showed how much of my wealth had been transferred to irrevocable trusts. He laid it out in a way that made it clear this wasn't just about what Rachel thought she was entitled to. This was about what she'd never even known existed. I watched as Steve shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing over at Rachel. Her face had gone from confident to tense, the smile dropping off her face like a curtain falling. She was starting to realize that something wasn't right. She still didn't understand how deep it went, but I could see it in her eyes. The moment she knew something was off, Tom leaned forward, speaking with quiet authority. "As you can see, Your Honor, the assets in question have already been secured in private trusts, well beyond the reach of the petitioner. These transfers were made in full compliance with the law, and the wealth in question is not available for division in this proceeding." Rachel's lawyer stammered, trying to push back. But that's not what we were told. The list of assets is incomplete. There's no mention of these transfers. The judge, a man who'd clearly seen it all, raised an eyebrow. "Counselor, how do you explain the discrepancies in the asset listing?" he asked, his voice steady but cutting. Steve floundered, flipping through his papers, trying to find an answer that would hold up. "It's possible there's been an oversight, Your Honor. We'll need more time to." The judge wasn't having it. "This doesn't look like an oversight. It looks like an intentional omission." We'll need a full explanation before moving forward. Rachel's confidence had evaporated, her shoulders slumping ever so slightly. I could see the shift in her, how she was starting to panic. I didn't react. I didn't let her see that I'd been preparing for this moment for years. But the satisfaction was there, quiet and controlled. She had no idea how much I'd already secured, how much of her so-called victory had been taken from her before she even stepped into the courtroom. The rest of the hearing moved forward, but I barely heard the details. I was focused on Rachel, her face, her posture, everything about her. Her veneer of confidence had cracked, and now it was just a matter of time before she realized the full extent of what I'd done. The judge gave us a few more instructions, then ended the session, saying he'd need more time to review everything. As people shuffled out of the courtroom, Rachel shot me a look over her shoulder, her eyes wide, but she didn't say a word. Tom came over and handed me the file. "We've got her on the ropes," he said quietly, as Rachel and Steve walked out the door, her steps heavy with the weight of what had just happened. "You played this well. Stay calm. We've still got a long way to go." I nodded, the quiet satisfaction still there. This wasn't over, but the first shot had been fired, and Rachel hadn't even seen it coming. The moment I walked into my office after the hearing, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen, and sure enough, it was Rachel. She wasn't calling to check on the kids or to have a civil conversation. I knew exactly what this was about. I answered, leaning back in my chair, keeping my voice steady. "Hello." Her voice cracked through the line, sharp and angry. "What the hell, Matt? What was that today?" I could practically feel the heat from the other end of the phone. "It was a hearing, Rachel. We're in the middle of a divorce, remember? Don't play dumb with me. Why didn't Steve have those asset transfers listed?" She spat. "Why didn't we know about them? Why didn't you tell me?" I felt a brief flicker of satisfaction. The panic was there now, just under the surface. But I kept my tone calm, cool. "I don't know, Rachel. Maybe your lawyer didn't do his job. You should ask him." I could hear her breathing heavily. "I did trust him. How did you hide all that from me? How long has this been going on?" She was pacing now, I could tell. I could almost hear her mind working in overdrive, trying to piece together what she'd missed. "The court's just getting started," I said, letting the words sink in slowly. "I haven't hidden anything. All I've done is secure what's mine. You're the one who didn't bother asking the right questions before you filed." Rachel didn't say anything for a moment, and I could feel the space between us grow. She was trying to process, trying to make sense of everything she thought she knew. But it was clear she didn't have a full picture yet. "You did all this behind my back? I didn't even know you were doing any of this." Her voice rose in pitch, disbelief turning to anger. How could you screw me like this?" "I didn't take the bait. You asked for this, Rachel. You wanted out, you wanted to walk away with more. I'm just making sure I don't get taken to the cleaners." There was a brief pause, then Rachel let out a laugh that sounded more like a nervous breakdown. "I can't believe this. I thought I was going to be the one walking away with everything. I thought I had it in the bag." Her voice cracked, and for the first time, I heard the panic in her words. "You really thought it would be that easy?" I asked, the coldness in my voice surprising even me. "I don't know. I thought I knew you," she muttered, quieter now. "I didn't think you'd be this shady." I stayed silent for a moment, letting that one hang. "You never asked the right questions, Rachel. You were too busy focusing on your freedom." She didn't respond right away. I could hear her breathing heavily, and I knew she was dialing Steve's number. The sound of her voice was a mix of frustration and disbelief. "I'm calling Steve. He's got to fix this. He has to." "Go ahead," I said, not even bothering to mask the bitterness that was slowly creeping in. "But good luck getting answers. Looks like you'll be paying for his incompetence." I hung up before she could say anything else, knowing exactly what she was going to do next. She would call Steve and he'd have no answers. She'd realized that not only had her lawyer failed her, but she had no control over this situation. I was in full control now. I didn't wait for Rachel to call back. I already knew what was coming. I'd heard it in her voice, the panic, the crack in her confidence. It was only a matter of time before she understood how deeply she'd misjudged everything. It would eat at her, the realization that she'd been blind to all of it. And when that happened, she'd be scrambling, trying to save face, trying to claw her way back. She had no idea what she was up against. The next few hours went by quietly, but I knew Rachel wouldn't stay calm for long. By the time evening came, I saw a string of messages from her lawyer, Steve. None of them were helpful, of course, just vague reassurances, promises of looking into it. He was trying to cover his ass. Rachel was burning through her money just to get answers, and I knew exactly how this would play out. By the time the next hearing rolled around, Rachel would be on the defensive. She'd be too deep into the weeds, grasping at straws, while I sat back and watched. I didn't need to attack her. I just needed to let her dig herself into a hole so deep, there'd be no way out. The days after the hearing were quiet, too quiet. Rachel's frantic calls to her lawyer continued, but there wasn't much she could do with the information she had. I'd already planted the seeds of doubt. Steve had no answers, and Rachel was starting to realize that everything she thought she knew was wrong. But I wasn't going to stop there. No, I needed to put the final piece into place. It was time for one last move, one that would leave her completely blindsided. I'd been sitting on it for weeks, planning it carefully. The house, our house, the one she still thought was part of the settlement. The one she thought she was about to take. I'd watched her talk about it with such certainty, posting about it on social media, smiling about her new life. She had no idea that her victory was already slipping through her fingers. That afternoon, I contacted the lawyer I'd set up everything with. A quick phone call to confirm the transfer, and a few digital signatures later, it was done. The house was officially moved into the name of a trust. It was mine legally, and there was no way she could claim it now. Not unless she wanted to fight a battle that would take her years, and even then, it was all but impossible. I didn't gloat, didn't even feel the need to celebrate. The satisfaction came from knowing that Rachel was about to walk into a fight she couldn't win. She'd spent so much time planning, thinking she was about to get everything she wanted. I was about to let her think that for a while longer. The transfer was done. The deed was now in my name. And as I sat in my office, watching the papers come through, I felt a cold sense of satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge. It was about making sure I didn't lose what I'd worked for, what we had worked for. But Rachel had never understood that. She thought I was some kind of fool, someone who could be pushed aside. I took a moment, staring out the window at the city below. I'd let her keep thinking she had the upper hand. Let her believe that she was still walking away with the house and everything else. She'd get one last round of posts, one last boast about how she was finally going to have it all. Then, I'd sit back and wait for her to realize the truth. That night, it didn't take long for Rachel to pop up on social media again. Another picture of her, another caption about her bright future, a post about how everything happens for a reason, and how she'd finally found her real happiness. And right there, front and center, her plan to move into the house. She was still convinced it was hers, still basking in the illusion that she was going to walk away with it all. I didn't respond. I didn't even feel the urge to reach out and tell her what had already happened. It didn't matter. She was still living in a bubble, completely unaware of what was about to hit her. I watched the likes roll in, her friends commenting, congratulating her on her new life. She had no clue. A few days later, I caught a glimpse of her post again, this time with a smug caption about starting fresh in the house she assumed she was going to get. She even tagged a moving company, like she was already packing. I smiled to myself, the kind of smile that's more about calm control than anything else. She was about to fall hard. I didn't need to tell her anything. The truth would come out soon enough. It always did. But by then, she would be too deep into her own delusions to do anything about it. And the worst part? She wouldn't be able to blame anyone but herself. I couldn't help but feel a cold satisfaction as I watched her continue to post. Each time she did, it was like she was digging herself deeper into a hole she had no idea she'd fall into. I'd let her play her part for now, let her think she was about to get the life she thought she deserved. But she was out of moves, and I'd already won. The day of the final settlement meeting arrived, and I could feel the tension in the air before I even stepped into the conference room. Rachel walked in with that same cocky posture, thinking she had the upper hand. She had no idea that the rug was about to be pulled out from under her. Her lawyer, Steve, was right behind her, looking more flustered than usual, like he'd been losing sleep over something. Maybe he knew the truth was coming to light. I walked in quietly, not giving anything away. My lawyer, Tom, was already at the table, papers in front of him, calm as ever. He had everything lined up, all the evidence in place. Rachel, on the other hand, looked like she was about to win a war, but I could tell her confidence had started to slip. Maybe she felt it, too. Maybe she didn't know exactly what was coming, but something was off. We sat down, and the mediator, a woman in her mid-40s, professional but not unfriendly, called the meeting to order. She went through the usual formalities, asking both sides to state their positions. Rachel and Steve laid out their demands, with Rachel giving her usual spiel about how she was entitled to this, that, and the other thing. She still thought she was walking away with everything she'd been claiming online. The house, the properties, all of it. Then it was Tom's turn. He didn't need to speak for long. He simply slid a thick stack of papers across the table, right in front of the mediator. The air shifted when she saw the pile. She knew exactly what was in it. Rachel, though, glanced at it quickly, her eyes scanning the pages before she looked up at Tom. "Your Honor," Tom said smoothly, "these documents reflect the current legal status of the properties in question. As you can see, the assets Rachel is requesting have already been transferred into irrevocable trusts. These transfers took place long before the divorce was filed." Rachel's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She glanced at Steve, who was now flipping through the papers with a look of complete disbelief. He didn't know what the hell was going on, either. The mediator, clearly recognizing the gravity of what was unfolding, asked, "Mr. Wilson," she said to Steve, "why weren't these documents disclosed earlier in the process?" Steve stammered, trying to recover from the shock. I wasn't aware of these transfers. I wasn't shown these documents before. I'll need more time to review them, Your Honor." The mediator didn't let him off the hook. "You weren't aware? You've had weeks to present a full list of assets. This should have been disclosed much earlier. I'm not sure how we can proceed without this information." I could see Rachel's confidence cracking, piece by piece. Her eyes darted from the pile of documents to Steve. Her lips pressed together as she tried to keep herself together. She still didn't fully understand how everything had slipped through her fingers. She didn't know about the trusts I had set up, the legal maneuvering I'd done to make sure she wouldn't get her hands on a dime more than she deserved. Tom didn't waste any time. The house, the properties, the bank accounts, none of it is in Rachel's name. All of it was secured well before the divorce proceedings began. There's nothing left for her to claim. Rachel's breath caught in her throat, and she finally spoke up, voice barely a whisper. This is a mistake. This can't be right. I was going to get the house. You can't, this isn't fair." Tom didn't look up, just kept his gaze steady. "Life's not fair, Rachel. You've had every opportunity to ask the right questions, to do your due diligence. But you didn't." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Rachel wasn't prepared for this. None of it made sense to her. She had built up this entire narrative in her head about what she was going to get, and now it was all crashing down. She looked to Steve, hoping for some kind of miracle, but he just shook his head, unable to offer any explanations that would change the situation. The mediator cleared her throat, glancing at Rachel's lawyer, then back to the pile of documents. "Mr. Wilson, I'm going to need a full explanation from you by the end of the day. For now, though, we need to proceed with the settlement terms." Rachel stared at the papers in front of her, and for the first time, I saw the panic in her eyes. She could no longer pretend she was in control. She had no leverage left. All her bravado had been stripped away, and all that was left was the cold, harsh reality that she'd been outplayed. "Rachel," I said, my voice low but firm, "this is over. You've already lost. The house is mine. The assets are mine. You can't take anything from me. Her shoulders slumped, her breath shallow, and for a moment, I thought she might break. But then, with a last, defiant look, she turned to Steve. Just get me something, she muttered, almost to herself. The mediator raised her eyebrows. It seems we have no choice but to proceed with the settlement terms as outlined. Then, Rachel didn't argue. She couldn't. With everything now on the table, her position was untenable. Her world had shifted, and there was no going back. She slumped in her chair, the fight draining out of her. With little choice left, Rachel finally agreed to the terms. The settlement was skewed heavily in my favor, and there was nothing she could do about it now. She had no bargaining power left, no cards to play. It was over. As we walked out of the conference room, Rachel kept her eyes down, not daring to look at me. I couldn't help but feel a small sense of relief. This wasn't personal, it was just business. But that didn't make the victory any less satisfying. I had done what needed to be done. Rachel didn't say a word as she left the final settlement meeting. Her shoulders were slumped, and she walked out of the room like she was carrying a weight too heavy to bear. The confidence that had once filled her every movement was gone, replaced by something far emptier. I stood there for a second, watching her retreat. She hadn't even looked at me as she passed. I didn't need her to. I knew she could feel it, the shift, the loss. She'd been so certain of her victory, but now she was walking away with nothing. All the bravado, the posts, the plan, it had meant nothing. I spent the next few months watching as Rachel slowly disappeared from the life I had once shared with her. Her social media posts stopped altogether. No more celebrations, no more gloating. The silence was deafening. I didn't need to check her profile every day, but I did anyway, at first just to see the empty space where her posts used to be. She wasn't just quiet. She was completely gone from the public eye. That felt like victory too. Like her attempts to turn this into a spectacle had been wiped out. Over those months, I rebuilt my life. It wasn't a dramatic transformation, just the slow, steady work of reclaiming everything I'd once pushed aside. I found new routines, took on new projects, and felt a sense of freedom that I hadn't realized was missing for so long. My focus had always been on everyone else, on Rachel's happiness, on our family, on keeping up appearances. Now, I was doing things for me, and that was the biggest relief of all. A few months later, there was a family gathering, one of those events where everyone pretends everything is normal. Rachel was there, of course. She showed up like she had to, but she was a shadow of the person she used to be. The Rachel who once demanded attention in every room was gone, replaced by someone smaller, unsure of herself. I watched from the side, sipping my drink, just observing. She was fidgeting with her phone at first, but when someone spoke to her, she put it down, forced a smile, and tried to engage in small talk. The conversation was awkward, like she didn't know how to be around people anymore. Her words were stilted, as if she was trying to keep up a facade that wasn't even her own. The sharpness, the confidence, none of it was there anymore. I didn't feel sorry for her. Maybe I should have, but I didn't. I had spent so many years tiptoeing around her, trying to make her happy, trying to make sure everything was perfect for her. Now I had peace, real peace, and I wasn't about to feel guilty about it. As the evening wore on, Rachel seemed to retreat even further into herself. Her smiles were forced, her words empty. It was like watching someone who had lost all sense of who they were and was now struggling to figure out how to fit into a world that had left them behind. I stood up quietly, excused myself, and left the gathering early. I didn't need to be part of that anymore. I walked out of the house into the cool night air, the weight of everything that had happened finally lifting. I'd won, not just the legal battle but my life back. The life I had put on hold for so long. I was finally in control, finally free of the years I'd spent living for someone else. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was walking toward a future that was mine to shape.